The president called on Americans to fight for what he called the soul of the nation in his primetime speech last night. He accused former President Trump and his supporters of attacking American democracy. Ed O'Keefe was with the president in Philadelphia last night. So, Ed, good morning.
Deborah, good to see you. President Biden spoke to a crowd of mostly other Democratic Party leaders, liberal activists with groups like Indivisible and labor union bosses, and he mentioned Trump or MAGA a total of 16 times in his address. But White House aides are dismissing criticism that this was too political a speech, arguing there's nothing political about sticking up for American democracy.
Too much of what's happening in our country today is not normal. Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
Speaking on the grounds of a national park and flanked by U.S. Marines, the president took direct aim at his predecessor and members of the Republican Party.
MAGA Republicans do not respect the Constitution. They do not believe in the rule of law. They do not recognize the will of the people. They refuse to accept the results of a free election.
A CBS News poll finds more than half of registered Republicans consider themselves part of the MAGA movement.
You can't love your country only when you win.
Visiting President Biden's hometown of Scranton, Pennsylvania, before the president spoke, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy argued Americans are not better off.
Fact, real income. What you take home after inflation and taxes is lower now than when Joe Biden took office.
While McCarthy focused on pocketbook issues, concerns about threats to American democracy are now a top issue for voters. Among those concerns, the influence of money in politics, plus concerns about political violence and overturning elections. Earlier Thursday, former President Donald Trump called into a conservative radio show and vowed to pardon those who participated in the deadly attack on the Capitol on January 6, 2021.
Yeah, I will look very, very favorably about full pardons if I decide to run and if I win.
That's exactly the kind of thinking the president said must be rejected.
They fan the flames of political violence that are a threat to our personal rights, to the pursuit of justice, to the rule of law, to the very soul of this country.
So he's president of the United States, but you'd be forgiven if you thought the president was spending an inordinate amount of time in Pennsylvania these days. He was in Wilkes-Barre earlier in the week, Philadelphia last night. He's going back to Pittsburgh on Monday for a Labor Day event. And former President Trump joins him in Pennsylvania this weekend as well. He's set to hold a campaign rally Saturday night with the GOP candidates for a statewide office for governor and Senate. That's why the Keystone State's getting so much attention, because of those big, expensive, competitive races. I should point out the president's also headed to Wisconsin and Ohio next week, Deborah, two other big 2022 battlegrounds.
Absolutely, Ed. So that was some speech last night, and President Biden tried to ensure that he wasn't criticizing all Republicans. So give me your take. Do you think the White House is confident that this more direct strategy isn't going to backfire?
They look at the polling that CBS has done, that other news organizations has done, that demonstrates now that concerns about the fate of American democracy are ranking high. In our survey that was released over the course of this week, it's the economy and inflation, followed directly by concerns about democracy before guns and crime and abortion rights. So given that it has popped up that high, they believe there is an opportunity here to be discussing an issue that remains a top-of-mind concern for a majority of voters. What I find notable, though, is that if you look at that polling, as it was in our report, it's concerns about money in politics first before the concerns about overturning elections or potential violence. Money in politics has been an issue for voters, I think, for a very long time. You're talking to say it's too expensive, all that advertising, these guys that create these super PACs, that's part of it. That's interesting because you don't hear either party talking about that. You hear them talking about the more urgent concerns around what happened on January 6th and the ongoing denial of reality by certain Republican candidates.
Yeah. And so we're about 2 months out now before the midterms. Do you think that this soul of the nation pitch could really energize voters?
They believe it's going to help energize the Democratic base, independent voters who are inclined to support Democrats and need a reason to come home. And they remind us that this is something President Biden has been talking about since the summer of 2017, in the wake of the violence in Charlottesville, Virginia, that was sparked by white supremacists, that led former President Trump to say that there are good people on both sides of that incident. Because that's what sparked Joe Biden's intent to run for president again after failing twice and serving as vice president. He didn't plan to do it, he says, until that happened. There was an op-ed written that summer for The Atlantic. It became the basis of his theory of the case going into 2019 when he ran. He talked about it on his first day on the campaign trail, exactly 2.5 miles from where he spoke last night. And he's continued to talk about it ever since. This was an amplification of his renewed concerns about it. And yes, the White House believes this, in addition to conversations he'll have in the coming days about the economy, about abortion rights, the speech he gave on gun control this week, those are the issues they're concerned they can keep the focus on. We should point out, Deborah, there's a jobs report coming in about an hour. It may not be so great. They know the economy is top of mind for most voters. They're trying to change the subject, move the focus on the Republicans so that it doesn't become an argument of, have Democrats done enough to help the economy? This is one way to do it.
And certainly Republicans are talking about the economy. You know, you'd mentioned House Minority Leader McCarthy and his pre-buttal sticking to pocketbook issues. But, you know, the Biden administration is coming off a stretch of legislative wins. You know, can't deny that. How is the admin trying to capitalize off of that?
Watch what they do next week. He'll go to Wisconsin and Pennsylvania on Labor Day to talk about passage of the big climate and health care bill, the infrastructure package last year, the rescue plan that has pumped billions of dollars into communities across the country and helped buoy the economy. Tuesday, they hold a major ceremonial bill signing here at the White House for that Inflation Reduction Act, the deal he cut with Joe Manchin and Democrats that includes a lot of that and the tax increases on big corporations. Wednesday, he rallies, in essence, here at the White House with the Obamas. They'll be here for their official portrait unveiling. It'll be an opportunity for the two of them to remind people the things they did together over 8 years when President Obama was living here and that President Biden has accomplished since he got here. Then next Friday, he goes to Ohio for a big event, the groundbreaking of that major semiconductor plant that's going to be built in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio, that was held up until passage of that bipartisan CHIPS Act that they've talked about this summer, that was designed to help boost the semiconductor industry in this country, respond to the threats from China and the supply chain concerns. He sees that as a big bipartisan win that was designed to create jobs. So next week is kind of brag week around here as the official midterm election season begins, and that'll be the theme of what they talk about going forward.
Going to be a busy week for them, for you, and it sounds like for the people mowing the lawn over there at the White House.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your insight.
Take care.
You got it.